There was a time when a motorcycle didn't need winglets, electronic riding modes, or a massive fairing to look powerful. It just needed 4 cylinders, a big engine, a round headlight, and the right attitude. That motorcycle was the Kawasaki Zephyr 1100. And now imagine this classic Japanese formula returning for a new generation. A modern 2027 Kawasaki Zephyr 1100. Not as a futuristic superbike, not as another aggressive street fighter, but as something increasingly rare, a true big-bore retro motorcycle. And if Kawasaki ever decided to bring the Zephyr name back, this could be one of the most interesting retro revivals Japan could produce.
The original Zephyr wasn't designed to chase the latest superbike. That was exactly the point. It represented a different philosophy. A large, naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine, a traditional steel tube chassis, a comfortable upright riding position, a round headlight, and styling that didn't need to scream for attention. The Zephyr 1100 took the classic Kawasaki naked bike formula and gave it serious displacement. That combination made it very different from modern performance motorcycles. It wasn't about being the fastest machine on the road. It was about the feeling of a big Japanese 4-cylinder engine. The sound, the torque, the mechanical character, and the unmistakable presence of a large naked motorcycle. That's why the Zephyr became more than just another Kawasaki model. It became part of Japan's UJM-inspired motorcycle culture. And that's precisely why the idea of a modern Zephyr is so fascinating.
Now imagine Kawasaki taking that original philosophy and carefully updating it for 2027. The design wouldn't need to become complicated. In fact, keeping it simple would be the key. A round LED headlight, a sculpted but restrained fuel tank, a compact tail section, exposed engine components, 4 exhaust headers flowing into a modern exhaust system, and classic Kawasaki proportions. The goal wouldn't be to recreate the 1990s motorcycle piece by piece. It would be to capture the spirit of the Zephyr. Think of it as a motorcycle that looks familiar from 20 feet away, but completely modern when you get closer. Modern LED lighting, modern instrumentation, modern brakes, modern suspension, and hopefully modern emissions technology without destroying the character of the engine. Because if Kawasaki ever revives the Zephyr name, the biggest mistake would be making it look like every other modern naked bike. The Zephyr needs to remain unmistakably a Zephyr. And then we reach the most important question. What would power it? The original Zephyr 1100 was famous for its large 4-cylinder character, so a modern revival would need an engine that delivers the same emotional experience. Not necessarily a gigantic horsepower number. Instead, strong low-end torque, smooth mid-range power, and that unmistakable 4-cylinder soundtrack. A modern 1000 to 1100 cc class engine could make perfect sense, something tuned for real-world riding rather than chasing superbike numbers. Imagine rolling onto the throttle at 3000 RPM, feeling the engine pull harder, and hearing 4 cylinders begin to build that unmistakable Japanese mechanical soundtrack. That's the experience modern retro motorcycles sometimes struggle to reproduce. The numbers might not dominate a dyno chart, but the character could. And that's exactly where the Zephyr could stand apart. Of course, a 2027 motorcycle couldn't simply copy the technology of the 1990s. Safety and regulations have changed. So a modern Zephyr would need modern equipment. ABS, traction control, ride-by-wire, multiple riding modes, A modern LCD or TFT display, updated suspension, and powerful radial-mounted brakes. But here's the important part. The electronics should stay in the background. You shouldn't ride the motorcycle because of its software. You should ride it because of its engine, its chassis, its sound, and its character. That's the balance Kawasaki would need to achieve. Give riders modern safety without turning the Zephyr into another electronic gadget on two wheels. Because the reason people still remember motorcycles like the Zephyr isn't because of their electronics. It's because they had personality. And that's why the idea of a 2027 Kawasaki Zephyr 1100 is so interesting. It represents something the motorcycle industry doesn't produce very often anymore. A big Japanese motorcycle that's powerful, but doesn't need to look aggressive. Modern, but not futuristic. Retro, but not simply a copy of the past. And perhaps most importantly, it could reconnect Kawasaki with an era when Japanese motorcycles were defined by massive four-cylinder engines, simple proportions, and unforgettable mechanical character. Would Kawasaki actually bring the Zephyr 1100 back? Right now, we should treat this as a revival concept, not an official announcement. But if Kawasaki ever decides that the retro motorcycle market needs something more serious than another small displacement nostalgia bike, the Zephyr name would be one of the most powerful names they could resurrect. Because sometimes, the future doesn't need a completely new idea. Sometimes, it just needs to remember what made the old ones special. The Zephyr 1100 was one of Kawasaki's great retro machines. And if it ever returns, the Japanese muscle bike era might have one more chapter left.